Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, cities as they grow face a very daunting issue, and that's how to get around. How do you keep moving as the metropolitan area grows and grows and thickens and thickens? It's not just about getting from A to B, but it's also about connecting each other and to each other cities and to each other area and to all of the economies. To give us some perspective on all of this, I'd like you to welcome our panel. First of all, John Howe, who is the Vice President, Investment Strategies, Metrolinx. Rick Goldring. Rick Goldring is the Mayor of Burlington, His Worship. Thirdly, Mitzie Hunter, CEO of Greater Toronto CivicAction Alliance. Nice to see you, Mitzie. And His Worship again, Joel Burns, who is the Councilor of Fort Worth, Texas, City of Fort Worth, Texas. Now, as you know, Miro and Mark, who organized this whole conference, are a couple of cheapskates, so they don't have a chair for this panel, and I'm supposed to do it. And of course, I'm honored to do it. Let me begin, if I could, with you, Councilor Burns. Before I get into the other three who are enmeshed in our current problems, you can perhaps put down some standards for us, some bars that we need to reach about how well you're doing in Fort Worth.
Okay.
Let us pray.
Well, what there is to get is Fort Worth and Toronto are incredibly different cities. I'll give you a couple of examples from my district. We're in the process of getting commuter rail or rail out from the center city to the airport, and I've got some neighborhoods in my district that are unhappy about it coming through and diesel engines idling on their way out to the airport. We've got some conservative politicians who want to remove our bike lanes and put in additional lanes of vehicular traffic. So really what there is to get is there's not much Fort Worth and Toronto have in common.
Good on you.
I will quickly say Fort Worth is a city of about 800,000 people, and we have 8 single-member districts. I represent about 100,000 folks. I serve on the Regional Transportation Council for Dallas-Fort Worth and North Central Texas, and also serve as the chair of our Housing and Economic Development Committee in the city of Fort Worth. We have a lot of similarities and some differences. Our city, the region is about 7 million people, which makes it comparable to Toronto. There's, like I said, about 800,000 in the city. There's about twice that in Dallas, and then in the entire region, there's about 6.7 million. And we're edging closer and closer towards 7 million people. A state of 27 million, so we're close to the size of the nation of Canada in the state of Texas. We have challenges. One of the things that I heard earlier in a number of sessions that I hope we get a chance to talk about during the course of this session is having political will and political leadership and the impact of politics on public policy. Not unlike, I would say, most metropolitan areas, and Toronto may fit within this and may not, we have underprovided for our transportation needs for the last 25 years. We've neglected transit. We've neglected our investment in roadways and highways. And now we don't have the funds by which to make many of those things happen. And it's a challenge, and we have to make difficult choices. So I am more than happy to be here, part of this conversation today, and hopefully we can find some analogies along the way.
Well, welcome to Fort Worth, Canada. That was excellent. One of the things that you did say, and I want to go to our other mayor in a moment, but the idea of political will and political leadership was number one for you. And I gather your transportation council is made up of all politicians?
Correct. It's 42 members from member cities of the, we have a municipal planning organization called the Council of Governments, and every county in Texas is part of one of those. And our our Council of Governments actually has taken on some bonding authority and some other things that a number of the kind of more rural metropolitan planning authorities don't, in that we take on some of the highway funding mechanisms. We help with doing some of the toll projects, things like that, in order to get get the partnerships necessary. One of the references earlier were partnerships are waiting for someone else to do something about it. We are at such a deficit in terms of our investment in road planning, highways, the number of cars. We are the city of Fort Worth for most of the last 8 years each, and for the last 10 years as a block is the largest growing large city in the United States. We've grown from 500,000 to 800,000 in 15 years. And with that incredible growth, we unfortunately have brought most of that in greenfield development. I grew up on a ranch just south of Fort Worth that at the time was 12 miles from downtown. That ranch is now all rooftops and Bradford pears and cul-de-sacs, and the ranch is gone, and that development continues on for another 12 miles beyond that today. I'm not that old, I'm 44, so it was not that long ago that I was growing up on that ranch and riding my horse in what is now a city park where kids go make out with their girlfriends. Witnessing that tidal wave of suburban growth as a kid and seeing the way of life on that land change forever really impacted me. And so in the 1990s, we were the urban pioneers that moved in and fixed up the old 19-teens or 1920s house that everyone had forgotten about after they had forgotten, before forgetting about the 1950s commercial corridors when everything moved out to the shopping malls of suburbia. There were the 19-teens and 1920s corridors, and beyond that, the downtown core. We just kept moving further and further out, eating up the land. And so that was very impactful for me as a kid. Like I said, the ranch is gone. The way of life on that land is gone forever, and you can't get that back. But you can go back and you can claim and fix and revive those corridors. And today, in the neighborhood that I represent and that I live in, the urban pioneers of the 90s that moved in and fixed the cool craftsman bungalows of the 19-teens and 20s have been replaced by a hipster set that actually has kids that go to the local school. And they, you read about these local food movements and things like that. Well, the whole local movement in general is happening in this neighborhood because the old commercial corridor that was all boarded up is now places where you can get 86 different craft beers on tap or go to the vegan restaurant or whatever the case may be, and all the cool kids want to be there, and it makes me feel very, very old. But that reinvestment has paid off, and we're finding that some of those young folks, God, just sounded like my dad when I said that.
Young folks.
Some of the folks of this millennial generation, does that sound better? This is something that they're seeking out, and they don't remember, they weren't around in the 1990s when we showed up and we're scraping lead-based paint and breathing it in. They're happy to see what's happened since and further invest in the neighborhood.
Have more sense of urbanness.
Yes.
Yeah. What if I could go over to you, Mayor Goldring? If you could contrast and compare your situation in Burlington. It's not exactly the same size, but I mean it's pretty good. And I just thought if you could sort of draw on a couple of things. One, how you see the city in relation to the region, and B, if you could pick up on the thought about political leadership and political will.
Certainly. First, to give you some background, Burlington is at the western end of the GTA. At the western end of Lake Ontario. We're a city of about 180,000 people. We're part of Halton Region. We're a city that is 50% urban, 50% rural, at least we're trying to keep it that way. We are a poster child for the province's Places to Grow plan. We don't have any more room for meaningful greenfield development. It's all intensification, infill, and redevelopment, which is a great challenge, but also a great opportunity to convert more of our community into mixed-use, walkable, and compact neighborhoods. It's interesting. Burlington, I think, has some similarity with Fort Worth in the fact that it was built for the car. And we have about car ownership about 1.7 cars per household. I figure we have about 120,000 cars in Burlington, a city of 180,000 people. There's no question, suburban community. I grew up in Burlington. It was built for the car. So I think our challenge is trying to integrate our own local transit system with the Metrolinx big picture view and connect it to the GO station. I drove to the GO station this morning in Burlington. I didn't take our local transit. I saw a long line of cars that I was part of going to the parking lot, and I saw a couple of our Burlington Transit buses that didn't have anybody on it. So there's our challenge. There's our challenge. So I think the key going forward is to have much better links, I think, with Metrolinx going forward, and really look at potentially the regionalization for all transit. I'm sure some municipalities wouldn't like that, but I think we really need to look at some sort of regionalization and much more connectivity with all the local transits in the area.
Could I ask you how you and your council, not just you, how do you feel you fit in to the political framework that deals with regional transportation, or do you?
I think we feel we fit in. I mean, here we are at the western end of the GTA. We're a city of 180,000 people, so that's not necessarily big compared to Mississauga, Brampton, or Toronto, but we're a good-sized community. I think we realize that we have some input and some impact. I've certainly been involved in some of the Civic Alliance events that Mitzie's organization has arranged. It's interesting, on Monday or Tuesday actually, the GTA West is getting together. So all of Peel region, which includes Caledon, Mississauga, and Brampton, along with Burlington and Oakville from Halton, and Halton Hills and Milton from Halton, are getting together for our own summit on Tuesday to look at transportation and other economic development issues. So I think one of the challenges with transportation in the GTA area, though, is the whole governance issue, that we have so many local municipalities and so many regional municipalities and some single tiers. Who's on first and who's doing what? And there's a conflict sometimes with the 905 and the 416. And I'm not sure how we're going to address that going forward.
And just as a sidebar question, but there may be somebody in the audience interested. We've now spread ourselves. The GTA died without OBIT. And became the GTA plus Hamilton.
Right.
And you're now going to have a summit for at least the western end of it. On each occasion, we've left out the peninsula, the Niagara Peninsula. How do they feel? They feel badly being left out, do you think?
I don't know if I haven't talked to anybody specifically about that particular issue, but it's interesting. At a very, very recent meeting of the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, there wasn't just mayors of the GTHA there were mayors from Barrie and Kingston and Waterloo and Kitchener.
Right.
And we did talk about the funding tools with regard to proposed funding tools for Metrolinx. And it's interesting, those mayors that I mentioned from outside of the GTHA realize the significance of the big move to all of Ontario.
So
and they supported a resolution. They supported a resolution for the province to go ahead and look at new funding tools.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I go to John Metrolinx? John, how long have you been at Metrolinx? For quite a while.
From day one.
From day one, you're a day oneer. It is both blessed and blamed, but you're doing all right. You're now on a track that people are trying to get behind. No pun. Could you give some background for those who are not aware of how Metrolinx got to be, who it's accountable to, how it works, without becoming incredibly boring on it? It's important that they know. Good luck with it.
Well, let me table some big numbers, David, because I think the key reason why we have Metrolinx, why the province created Metrolinx, is we have the relentless challenge, just like Dallas, Fort Worth, of population growth and congestion. And we're right behind Dallas, Fort Worth. We have 6.6 million people in the GTHA. I don't want to forget Hamilton. And we're growing to 9 million in the next 25 years. And that's like bringing in the population of Greater Montreal and force-fitting it into this region. And the transportation solutions that are required to manage growth entail regional scale solutions as well as regional scale funding tools. We can't rely strictly on local governments and local taxpayers to rise to the challenge. And if we're going to deliver great transportation, if we're going to manage congestion, we have a $6 billion per year problem when it comes to congestion. And I see that as $6 billion per year of the entire region falling short of its human potential. But we have got to be able to get together around a common regional vision on the projects, the priorities, the services, the outcomes that we need to deliver to really put this region where it should be. You know, the greatest place on earth to live, to work, to invest in, with all due respect to Dallas, Fort Worth.
Thanks, John, very much. Mitzie, Civic Action's been in business about 10 years, and they have a number of projects and programs. They're all very useful, and they really are. I mean, I wish people knew more about its work. But one of the missions you took on, Civic Action took on, was the big move, supporting the big move, getting behind it, creating some energy out of civil society in order to make it go. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you saw was the deficiency in our social political world, and what you've done since then to see if you can help John get moving.
With pleasure. Thank you, Mayor. Civic Action is a nonprofit organization, and we are the region's organization for bringing the leadership together to look at what are the issues that we face, where are the gaps, and what do we need to do collectively to solve them. So we have no authority. We're not an official governance structure for the region, but we're a place that gets everybody in a room where we can talk and we can identify what we're going to do to take action against those issues that we've seen. In 2011, Civic Action held a regional summit. We had 1,000 people in the room for 2 days to talk about key areas. We had 10 themes that we dealt with, whether it was the economy, neighborhoods, arts and culture, transportation was one, the environment, and it really didn't matter what room you were in, you were talking about transportation, because this region has a growing crisis. We have not invested to the degree that we've grown. We actually have 100,000 people that are moving into the GTA each and every year. And as our population continues to grow and continues to expand, we have not kept up with investments in infrastructure. So that is putting an undue burden and is really causing a lot of congestion. We're losing productivity. The figure that's out there now is $6 billion. It's going to grow to $15 billion. And we just need to get the region moving. So what we decided to do as a nonprofit organization is to prioritize accelerating the funding for the big move so that we can get our region moving. I believe it's in 2 weeks. John will table an investment strategy that will recommend a suite of tools which will provide the needed revenues so that we can continue to build out. We already have $16 billion of projects that are currently active. We're building them. They're underway. We need to find the rest of the money, which is $34 billion. So our focus at Civic Action is not to pick the tools, and it's certainly not to pick the projects, because there are elected officials that are in place to make those decisions. However, they need a little bit of encouragement to make the tough decision. And that's what our organization is doing, is really fostering that environment so residents can recognize that if everyone is going to benefit from this improvement in transportation systems across the GTHA, and I mean multimodal systems, everyone needs to contribute to solving that. So that's our focus. In the last 10 years, we've touched on around 12 different projects of similar complexity, and we've achieved success, I believe, because of the people in the room who really bring a lot of their heart and passion to solving the region's challenges.
What's been the hardest part of the program?
Actually,
it's going along so well.
It's been fun. I have to tell you. So I'm the new CEO at Civic Action, and I was handed this file on day one. Bruce McQuaig, the CEO of Metrolinx, was the first person I met with. And we went over what the issue was, and he told me what he thought needed to be done, and I listened. However, when I served on an expert panel in Toronto to decide whether we were going to invest in a subway or an LRT, I took those binders home and I read all of those environmental assessments.
You're the only one in the room.
I did. I did my homework. And Mayor, I have to say, what I noticed is that we're really great at doing transit plans and mapping and putting forward a vision for what we want. But over the last 40 years, there's been very little done in terms of completed projects. And I think that people really want to see that. So we actually just held a regional forum called Our Region, Our Move. And today, this morning, you can actually get this online, we released a report that really it's the voice of 300 delegates that attended that forum. And the resounding message to our elected officials is get a move on it. We know we have a problem. We have a solution. We need the funding in place, get a move on it.
And the public support has moved with that, eh?
And the public support has moved with that. 71% of people know there's a crisis. 39% of people believe that we need to find the funding to fix that crisis.
Okay.
And elections are won with less than that. So there is a growing, there is a growing sentiment amongst the public. But what they want is that they want to believe it. They want to see that it's dedicated, it's regional, it's fair, it's sustainable, and that it's accountable and transparent.
So it's dedicated to that specific
to
task.
transportation, to the projects.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We use revenue tools here. Years ago, we used to call them taxes. I just wondered, what do you call them today?
You don't call them taxes.
We don't.
We have a few at our disposal, but I want to very quickly take a step back on politically. We in Texas have a little bit different responsiveness, I would say, amongst our state elected officials than what you might have here in the province of Ontario. Before 2010, we had a 76-74 split Republican-Democrat, and after the 2010 election, it was 101-49. And with that shift, after that came redistricting, and the Republicans in control, in order to maintain that huge shift, did what they affectionately refer to as crack and pack, where they took little bitty slivers of urban Texas, Houston, Austin, Fort Worth, San Antonio, et cetera, and then combined them with these huge suburban, exurban, and even rural districts. So in Fort Worth, we have legislators that live in Waco, Texas, and in Granbury, Texas, where actually the tornadoes were last night, and live in Flower Mound, Texas, who are representing us in the state legislature. Their concerns for urban Fort Worth are not what one would hope to have, mindful of our needs and issues. And with that, the effort is to create very packed minority districts that can elect Democrats, but pack them full, and then have these little sliver districts that go out into suburbia that are 60% Republican districts that they will always win. And so the only real election they have to play to is their primary. And their primary is where the Tea Party activists have gotten very entrenched and very active. And so they're no longer playing to their general constituents. They're playing to who their primary electors are, because most of them have been turned out in the last two elections.
Because they will always win the election.
Exactly.
The primaries to fight.
And with that, you've got this unique thing that I think is fairly new in Texas and quite unfortunate, in that you have local elected officials, including Republicans, who are out there saying, we have to have the tools in order to have new ways to create revenues. And our legislators are so afraid of doing anything that is perceived as a tax increase that they won't even give us the tools. There was a poll done recently, 2 years ago in Dallas-Fort Worth, that said that something like 70% of residents in Dallas-Fort Worth would be more than willing to create new taxes on just our region if given the opportunity. And our legislators wouldn't even allow us that opportunity to take a vote to increase revenues. We get most of our highway funding through a gas tax that over the last 3 legislative sessions, they have basically raided and done diversions into education and other issues. And also, you know, the reliance on a gas tax that is not pegged to any kind of increase doesn't grow. I mean, and as people are getting more and more efficient with their cars, the type of cars that they drive, the amount of driving that they do, there's less and less revenues coming into that already diverted gas tax fund. So we have to come up with new ways to fund our roads and transportation in general, but unfortunately in Texas, most of our transportation funding means funding for roads, because we have something like 6 times the amount of vehicular traffic, 6 times the number of vehicular traffic that we did 30 years ago on freeways that have only been increased something like 29%. And that is stifling. And we are a state that during the big heyday of oil money and things like that in the 60s and 70s prided ourselves on the fact that we didn't have a single toll road. You can't build a road in Texas today without it being a toll road and without having public-private partnerships. On the issue of rail, we are actually in our legislative session right now. It ends in 2 weeks. It remains to be seen whether or not some tools called innovative financing initiatives, which if I were to come up with an acronym for funding, I don't think I would come up with one called IFFY, but we're waiting to see if this passes. There's a possibility for that, but it would create, the typical public-private partnership opportunities for some of our rail. And rail is an important thing in Texas because as our highways, just like here, get more and more clogged, we've got to come up with rail corridors. There's a strong movement afoot to go through some private investors, largely from Japan, to create a high-speed rail from Houston to Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston to Dallas to DFW Airport to Fort Worth. Right now we have a commuter rail line between Dallas and Fort Worth that takes an hour and 5 minutes to get what you can drive in a car for about 35 to 40 minutes. And even though that's the case, there's still a lot of people who do that, particularly in peak hours, with a high-speed rail stop, with no stop in between the two at DFW. If you were to go straight across, it'd be 19 minutes. Dallas-Fort Worth is the 4th largest metropolitan area in the United States. It's New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston. And with Texas having the 4th and 5th largest metropolitan areas in the country, there's a lot of opportunities to connect those two. The Panama Canal is currently being expanded. There'll be new opportunities coming out of that for ships coming into the Port of Houston and then bringing rail up to Dallas and Fort Worth. We have one of the largest inland free ports at Alliance Airport in Fort Worth. Opportunities to then package, repackage, ship out. The opportunities are great, but you have to have the political leadership and political will to seize those opportunities and create the funding mechanisms by which you can create that high-speed rail from Houston to DFW in order to seize those opportunities. And the clock at the Texas legislature is ticking, and we'll see what the next 2 weeks bring.
Well, thank you. Okay. I'm going to go to thank you. I'm going to go to the audience in a moment, but while they get their questions ready, a question on the region. And we've touched on it, but I'm going to ask the other three. But let me ask you, in that kind of political world you're living in, how do you deal with, beyond even transportation, how do you actually fashion some kind of regional approach to your politics and government, or do you? Like I said before, the Metropolitan Planning Organization that we have, the North Central Texas Council of Governments, has really kind of been elevated, I think. From a planning board kind of thing?
From that to basically doing what the state legislature can't do for us. And we don't derive any authority to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, but we can get federal funds into it. And we, for the first time, are able actually to bond out. And the Council of Governments has become kind of our backstop for some of our funding things. We have a new toll road going from downtown Fort Worth into the southwestern Metroplex called the Chisholm Trail Parkway. And we backstopped a lot of federal funds that we weren't sure were going to come through with some loans that were set up, bonded through the Council of Governments. And so because TxDOT is so limited in its amount of funding that it can give out because of taking out part of our gas tax, we have to find other ways to do it, and we're doing it that way. The other way that we're doing it is that, a lot of these big companies, Centrus, et cetera, are coming in and they're doing these managed lanes where we'll go through and rebuild a 4-lane highway, gut it all out. They'll do managed toll lanes in the interior 2 lanes where you basically pay to play to get on those, and to avoid congestion, you have to pay a toll, or you have to have a 3+ HOV. And then everyone else gets the new outside 2 lanes, and the entire facility is owned by, in this case, a Spanish foreign potential investment where they own the facility. And it gets public money, it gets private money, and the cities end up having to pay for all of the connectivity infrastructure. We have to redo our intersections to connect to these freeways in order to be part of them. So we're kind of held at bay on that. But it's one way to get the roads built, and that's what we're faced with.
That's a great story. Let me ask the other three, and it's my last shot at the region part, because one of the confusions for most people on the streetcar or the bus or in the car, when they see the city, is that Toronto, but they don't live in Toronto, they may live in Burlington. They see the GTA, they see the GTH, they see also the Golden Horseshoe, and for heaven's sake, the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So these terms all move around, And I'm wondering, is there any, are we, the growth plan was basically the Golden Horseshoe. The green plan was basically the greater Golden Horseshoe. And Metrolinx shares about 2/3 of that. So are we heading in some direction that my folks on the streetcar are going to have some coherence about? Or no? Or does it matter? Maybe I'm just a regional nut, but I wondered.
I think it does matter if we're going to be, and we are, a global international economic player, to plan for our transportation investments and deliver a great portion of our transportation system on a regional scale. I think we compete with the rest of the world, basically, on an urban region versus urban region basis. But having said that, it is so true that people are so concerned to see investments and benefits in their community, in their neighborhood. Yes, I think they buy into the concept of this bigger region, but rightfully, they're also looking for benefits in their neighborhoods, in their communities. We need to be able to demonstrate both. I think that's part of the challenge of regional balance.
Mayor Goldring, I can see your head nodding on that one.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. I believe, and I mentioned it earlier, in order to have a really, really effective regional transportation authority, I think you need to put the municipal transit authorities and put them together with Metrolinx. And I know that would be controversial in some communities, but I look at the challenges.
We understand you would have them integrated with Metrolinx?
Yes.
Metrolinx running, or Metrolinx
Taking over.
taking them over?
Yeah. Are some body to take them over and have them coordinate. I mean, it's silly. You know, you look at Burlington, you look at where we are.
Right.
And the fact is that we have about 50% of our workforce goes out of town every day to go to work. And we have them sort of in equal segments of Hamilton, Mississauga, Oakville, and Toronto. So as far as that interconnectivity, it's great, you know, that we have the GO Transit,
Yes.
which for us really is the Lakeshore GO line,
Right.
the rail. That's it really for us. We need to have more connectivity.
Okay.
And it's silly when people, and you look at the handy van, it's silly for people in Burlington that want to go to an event in Oakville, they have to be transferred somewhere from one handy van to another. I mean, it's just silly. I think in order to have meaningful transportation going forward, we have to have that question on the table of linking all the transit authorities in the greater Toronto-Hamilton area.
Okay. Hey, Mitzie, anything you want to chip in here?
I mean, there's always the elephant in the room. I mean, 70% of our transit is really Toronto transit. That's for the region's transit. 70% of it is right in the middle.
Right.
So I think that would need to be resolved. But the interconnectedness is something that, you know, we need to deal with quickly. I think that what we have to recognize is that, you know, when you asked about does regions matter, I think regions matter intensely, but I think regions matter more globally in terms of where people decide to locate. And I think that people will, in the future, in particular the millennials that you mentioned, are going to choose where they want to live. And we're going to want those talent, you know, to choose this region. So we have to get our act together, and we have to, in some ways, overcome our local politics so that we can advance this region. When you think of share of mind and heart and wallet, where people live, where they work, where they play, is extremely important. And what they need in terms of that interconnectedness is a seamless way to get around and to move around. And I have to say that if the talent is going to decide where they're going to live, the companies are going to follow because they follow the talent. And we've already seen that in terms of, you know, younger people deciding to move back to the core and back to urban centers because they like the lifestyle, they like the walkability, the cycling, and the liveliness of urban centers. So it's something that we have to pay attention to, and our political structures have to keep up with that. I think right now our transportation and lack of investment in a proper transportation network across this region is hobbling our region. And if we were just to, you know, kind of do the difficult bits and get that solved, we have a fabulous city region. People can choose to live and work anywhere they would like because we have just wonderful choices right across the GTHA. And if we look at, and we're really a collection of cities when you really, you know, explore the broader GTA. and local character is extremely important. And I think that's what makes us competitive. When you have the Markhams and the Vaughns and the Burlingtons that have their local character and their local flavor, and you can participate in that, but then you can also move around for work and for other things that you want to participate in.
I think it's important to underscore that they do have choices, and not to go all Richard Florida on us, but it's, we're competing with the Austins and Seattles and Portlands of the world, obviously, but we're also competing, with Fort Worth is competing with parts of Dallas. South Fort Worth is competing with West Fort Worth. So there are a lot of choices for them, and increasingly, though, they don't want those choices to be suburban. They are much more likely to not have a car. They're more likely to not have a driver's license. They're getting their first mortgages later. They're much more likely to rent than they were 5 years ago even. I mean, even in 2007, 2008, before the financial crunch. And it's not just about finances. It's about choices that they make about where they want to live and how they want to live. And you have to be providing, cities have to be adept enough to provide those type of environments, or they'll move on to the Austin or Portland or Seattle or Vancouver, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Okay, are we ready with the? Hello?
Is a hand waving up there?
I can't.
I see a hand.
One up there?
Would the person with the mic meet the person who'd like the mic, and we?
Okay, hello. I have a question for the mayor of Burlington.
Where are we looking?
Where are you?
Over here. Sorry.
Over here.
To
No.
See the general vicinity of where you are?
There, okay.
Okay. Okay.
As you know, various municipal politicians have seriously dropped the ball when it comes to endorsing revenue tools to pay for transit. So we need some hope right here, right now. What revenue tools would you support for regional transit expansion? And none is not an acceptable answer.
Yeah, so.
Sorry about this, Your Worship.
That's okay.
It's not a
fine.
plant.
So I will answer that question, but first of all, I want to preface my answer by saying this. This is no time for politics as usual. We are in a crisis situation with transportation in the area. We have to look at things differently. I think elected officials have to act differently and not just be full of sound bites, but be full of some substance and really addressing some of the issues and not just being political all the time. So with regard to those particular issues and the revenue tools, I suggest that I think I can say this safely, that we don't want property taxes to come anywhere near as a revenue tool for the big move. But I think there's all sorts of other things that need to be on the table. I think the whole idea of a sales tax, I think, has merit, because I do believe there's benefits for the whole province of Ontario. I don't think it has to be 1%, but maybe there's a percentage there. I think it makes sense to have some parking lot levies. That encourages the type of behavior you want, as far as making it more expensive to park your car and maybe more appealing to go onto transit. I think you want to look at road tolls. We already have road tolls on the 407. And then there's also the gas tax. So those are some. My council will be debating this after we debated at committee a couple weeks ago. We'll be debating it again Tuesday night at our city council meeting, where we'll finalize this. But I must say I'm very proud of our council, because we took 20 minutes to pass a resolution on this particular issue, and all 7 of us agreed that we need to have new revenue tools. Now, we disagreed on maybe in some of the tools, but we all agree that there needs to be new revenue tools, and it took us 20 minutes to debate that particular resolution.
Boy.
Wow.
Great. Send the lunch down to Toronto City Council. Who else we got?
Hi, Calvin Gladney, Mosaic Urban Partners from Washington, D.C. There's a little bit of a catch-22 to these multimodal transportation investments that you're talking about in terms of economic development, because they often create or can create economic development winners and losers. So I wanted to ask you guys about that catch-22 and how we can make transportation investments that reduce social inequities rather than exacerbate them.
I think that's an excellent point, and it's something that at our regional forum recently came squarely on the table. What are the community benefits? We have a $50 billion 25-year plan, and if everyone is going to contribute, everyone's going to benefit. What are some of the things that people will see to improve their lives, particularly those that really do need that access? So jobs, training opportunities for our young people. There's a lot of social equity issues in terms of where these projects go and how much investments happen and what routes we take in terms of those types of decisions. And I strongly believe that we need to broaden that discussion to ensure that that people who are paying really see that there is a benefit to them. And I think the biggest component of that is certainly the jobs component and the training component. So I know our Labour Council is working together with Metrolinx and IO and other partners to ensure that that's done. And I don't know if John has any more to say on that, but I think it's extremely important.
We're very much concerned about that question, which is why when we evaluate projects, when we select projects, we're measuring at least 5 bottom lines. Yes, financial impact, user impact, economic impact, environmental impact, and also social impact. And right now we're investing, I can think of 3 projects, LRT projects here in Toronto, the Scarborough RT conversion to LRT, Finch West LRT, and Shepherd East LRT. Those lines serve what we call priority neighborhoods in the city of Toronto, and connecting lower income Torontonians to mainstream career, educational, cultural, recreational opportunities create demonstrated benefit that we try to measure and is a major input into our project selection process.
Thanks, John. We have time for, no.
There's one.
Is that 26 seconds? We got one other person? There we are. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. We saw and heard today an incredibly good description of the vision for what transit can do. The mayor, you talked about economic development in Dallas-Fort Worth. You talked about the benefits of connectivity. And I know that Mitzie has done an incredibly good job talking about congestion, but we don't have, I believe, regional politicians that are speaking as eloquently as you have about the positive benefits of connectivity and transit and investment in transit infrastructure. And so I guess my question is, if we don't have that kind of vision set forward by someone of his stature within this region, are we going to be successful? Can we be successful?
I'll have to jump on that and say absolutely. And I think that's the key thing that we haven't been talking about as much as we should have with regard to the big move is the importance of the economic development piece. I mean, really they go hand in hand. Yesterday I had a meeting with 4 businesses in Burlington in the water technology sector, and it was interesting. Transportation came up as an issue. The one particular company is looking to recruit new people, and they said to me that transportation is so integral to their operation because they draw from a wide area, and it's very, very important. So there's no question transportation and economic development go hand in hand, and we need to be looking at economic development, or looking at transportation as an economic development opportunity. In Burlington, we're blessed with 3 GO stations, and that's a great asset. And we're looking at creating nodes of non-traditional types of development relatively close to those GO stations that can have amenities and that can be connected to the transit, and that would be great for new office and new research technology and so on and so forth. So I think there's more and more people that understand the connection between transportation and transit and economic development, and I think that will unfold in time even more so.
I want to leave people with one big number, which is $1 million. The $34 billion Metrolinx Big Move plan, if we can deliver that program over the next 25 years, we'll create 1 million new jobs in this region. That's not just jobs from construction, that's the multiplier effect kicking in. It's the job creation, the agglomeration benefits of bringing people, bringing jobs, bringing opportunities closer together. And in a region that is lagging behind the rest of the country on unemployment, I mean, I think an 8.5% unemployment rate is unacceptable. Job creation and increasing our economic productivity, those are important objectives that can be delivered with the right transportation investments.
Thanks, John.
Can I quickly,
No,
just
please.
one quick thing?
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be back in Toronto. I hadn't been here in almost 10 years, and I was a little stunned. It kind of the same thing as when I went to Vancouver. I was like, what did you do with the city I last visited? I will put, when I get back to the room, I'll pull some links to some of the funding mechanisms and some of the government associations that I can give to you guys, and I'll tweet them out. Twitter handles, Joel Burns, JOELBURNS, and ask that the City Age guys repeat those out to you guys. But I'll do that when I get back to the hotel room.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor, sorry. I elevated him to Mayor.
She might have an issue with
She
that,
might
actually.
not like that. I thought it was a great panel, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it.